Dearis, get more ice for your brother's drink. That's all my mother said. Not a thank you, not a glance. Just another order like I was the maid, not her daughter. Nathan walked in late, carrying nothing but a smile, and somehow he was the hero of the night. I'd spent the whole day cooking, serving, cleaning, waiting for someone to notice me. And then it snapped. No. The words slammed into the room like glass shattering. Laughter died, and for the first time in my life, every eye turned to me. Not because of what I gave, but because of what I refused. And that's where my story begins. If you've ever felt overlooked or treated like you didn't matter, this one is for you. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Hidden Family Revenge Stories, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Now, let me take you back to the night I realized everything had to change. The silence after my no didn't last long. My mother cleared her throat, forcing a laugh that sounded too bright, too forced. And within seconds, the conversation at the table picked up again as if nothing had happened. But for me, everything had shifted. I stood frozen in the doorway for a beat longer, my hand still gripping the gravy boat, my heart pounding so loudly I swore they could hear it. Then, like I had done my entire life, I slipped back toward the kitchen. That was the safe place, the corner where no one noticed me. From the stove, I could hear the sound of their voices spilling over each other. Nathan's laugh carried the loudest, followed by my father's booming tone as he asked about some new promotion. My mother's voice dripped with pride, repeating every detail Nathan shared as if she were the one who earned it. The clinking of glasses followed, punctuated by bursts of laughter that felt like knives against my skin. I leaned against the counter, my arms trembling, and let the sound wash over me. It was a familiar kind of pain. For years, this had been my holiday soundtrack. The scrape of forks, the echo of praise directed at someone else, the complete erasure of my presence. I tried to swallow it down, to breathe through it, but my chest burned. I glanced toward the dining room. From my angle, I could see Nathan at the head of the table, his dark hair slicked back, his watch catching the light every time he gestured dramatically during his story. My mother leaned close, laughing at every word, while my father poured him another generous glass of wine. Beside him, Aunt Margaret rested her chin on her hand, smiling as if Nathan were the most fascinating person she had ever met. Not one of them asked where I had gone. Not one of them noticed I was missing. The smell of roasted turkey and buttery rolls clung to my clothes, and suddenly it was suffocating. I had cooked it all. Every bite they were enjoying. I had planned the menu, done the shopping, prepped the vegetables, woken up before dawn to get the turkey in the oven. I had sweated over that stove for 2 days, and yet Nathan waltzed in late, empty-handed, and somehow became the reason we were all together. To Nathan, I heard my father's voice roar suddenly, so loud I nearly dropped the dish towel in my hands. For bringing this family together tonight. The words cut through me like glass. I gripped the edge of the counter, steadying myself as my knees threatened to buckle. Together? Nathan hadn't brought us together. I had. My work, my time, my labor. That's what made this night possible. Without me, there would be no feast, no laughter echoing through the dining room, no perfect photographs to plaster across social media later. But in my father's eyes, in everyone's eyes, I was invisible. The sound of clinking glasses filled the air again, sealing the toast that had erased me from my own family. My throat tightened, a lump forming that I couldn't swallow. I wanted to scream, to walk into that dining room and demand they see me just once. But instead, I reached for a fresh towel and began wiping the gravy stains from my apron. Old habits are hard to break. In that moment, I caught my reflection in the dark oven door. Tired eyes, flushed cheeks, hair sticking to my forehead with sweat. I looked like a stranger, like a woman twice my age who had spent her life bending to everyone else's needs. I hated what I saw, but I couldn't look away. The voices from the dining room grew louder, more animated. Nathan was now telling a story about his golf game with a potential client, and the table erupted in laughter. My mother's laugh was the loudest of all, sharp and high-pitched like applause. My father clapped him on the back, pride glowing on his face. I stood in the kitchen, listening to them celebrate my brother while the smell of food I had cooked wrapped around me like chains. And in that suffocating silence of my own little corner, the thought rose unbidden. What would happen if I simply walked away? I leaned against the counter, listening to the laughter swell again, and a bitter thought crept into my mind. This was my place. Not at the table, not in their toasts or their stories. My place was here. Behind the scenes, apron tied tight, making sure everything ran smoothly while they enjoyed each other. It hadn't just started tonight. This had been my role for as long as I could remember. I thought back to the first Thanksgiving I ever cooked alone. I was 12. My mother had been sick that week, and she told me I was such a little helper. I remember staying up late the night before, peeling potatoes until my hands cramped, carefully following recipes from a tattered cookbook. Everyone raved about the food the next day, but every compliment was directed at my mother. "Linda, you've outdone yourself again," the relative said. She smiled, never correcting them, and I stayed quiet because that's what good daughters do. From then on, it became tradition. Whenever the holidays came around, I was the one expected to take charge in the kitchen. At first, I thought it was a privilege. I told myself it meant they trusted me, that I was useful. But over the years, the word useful turned sour. Useful didn't mean valued. Useful meant invisible. "You're so good in the kitchen, Dearis," my mother would say whenever I hinted at doing something different. I used to beam at that, mistaking it for praise. But now I hear the truth behind it. You're not good enough anywhere else. Even tonight, 3 weeks earlier, the family group chat had buzzed to life. My mom's message came first, cheerful as always. "Thanksgiving planning. We'll make whatever Nathan likes this year since he's been so busy. I'd suggested we try something new. Maybe a dinner out at a restaurant on the bay so everyone could relax." I remember staring at my phone, waiting for someone to agree, for anyone to say it was a good idea. Instead, Mom's response came fast, sharp as a slap. "Traditions matter, dear. Besides, you're so good in the kitchen, I didn't argue. I never did. I just drove to 3 different grocery stores, hunted down the freshest ingredients, and cleared my entire week to make it happen. Because that's what they expected. Because that's what I was trained to do." And here we were, same story, same roles. Nathan, the celebrated son, basking in the glow of their admiration, while I was tucked away with a towel in my hands and grease on my face. I pressed my palms against the cold granite countertop, trying to ground myself. My chest ached with the weight of 34 years of being typecast in a role I never auditioned for. I wasn't their daughter, not really. I was their cook, their server, their quiet background character. My eyes burned as I remembered birthdays where Nathan's cakes had been store-bought, yet my mother gushed over them as if he had baked them himself. Meanwhile, the cakes I made from scratch were sliced and passed around without so much as my name being mentioned. Easter brunches, 4th of July barbecues, Christmas dinners. It didn't matter the occasion. The story never changed. I worked. Nathan shined. And the cruelest part? I let it happen. For years, I convinced myself it was love. That doing more meant I was loved more. That one day the scales would balance and they'd see my sacrifices for what they were. But standing in that kitchen, the walls pressing in, the sound of Nathan's voice rising above the rest, I knew the truth. I wasn't loved for who I was. I was tolerated for what I provided. The realization made my stomach clench so hard I had to grab the counter to steady myself. My throat tasted of iron, and I blinked back tears I didn't want to shed. Because crying wouldn't change anything. Because I'd been crying inside my whole life. I glanced back toward the dining room one more time. Nathan was raising his glass again, my parents beaming at him like he hung the stars in the sky. No one looked toward the kitchen. No one wondered how I was doing. And in that moment, I understood something I had been too afraid to admit for years. In my family, my role wasn't daughter. It was servant. And if I didn't break free, it always would be. I don't know why I reached for it. Maybe it was habit, maybe it was desperation, but when I saw my mother's iPad sitting open on the counter, screen glowing in the dim light of the kitchen, my hands moved on their own. I wiped my fingers on a towel, hesitated for just a second, then tapped the screen. Her Facebook page popped up, a flood of notifications lighting up the corner. And right there at the very top was the post that made my stomach clench. Excited for Nathan's special Thanksgiving menu. Can't wait to taste what my talented son picked for our family gathering. I read it 3 times, hoping the words would rearrange themselves into something else. Talented son, menu he picked. Like I hadn't been chopping and stirring and sweating since Tuesday. Like he'd done anything more than roll into the driveway late with a bottle of wine and a smile. The iPad wobbled in my hands, my grip slippery with grease and fury. I scrolled down, needing to see more even though I already knew what I'd find. Photo after photo. Holidays, birthdays, Easter brunches, Christmas mornings. In every picture, Nathan was front and center, grinning like he owned the world. My parents flanked him in most of them, their smiles wide, their bodies turned toward him like he was the sun. And me? I was there too. Sort of. My elbow in one frame, carrying a tray of deviled eggs. The back of my head in another, bent over the dishwasher. A blur in the background, setting the table while everyone else posed. Not once had I been in the center. Not once had they pulled me in close, smiled with pride, said, "This is my daughter." The weight of it hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was proof. 34 years of being the background character, documented for the world to see. My chest tightened, and I had to set the iPad down before I threw it across the room. My reflection wavered on the black screen, eyes red and jaw clenched. I looked like someone who'd been erased so many times she barely recognized herself anymore. "Dearis, where's the pumpkin pie?" My mother's voice floated in from the dining room, cheerful and oblivious. I swallowed hard, blinking away the sting in my eyes. I grabbed the pies I had baked that morning and slid them onto serving plates. My hands shook as I carried them into the dining room. Everyone was still seated, comfortably chatting, glasses full, plates half empty but abandoned in favor of Nathan's latest story. My mother didn't even look up when I walked in. "Just set them on the sideboard, honey." "We'll serve ourselves," I did as I was told, standing there for a moment with the knife in my hand, waiting for someone to notice, for someone to say thank you, for anyone to acknowledge that those pies had taken hours of my life. But no one turned. No one even paused. Instead, my mother touched Nathan's arm, eyes shining. "Tell them about your new place, sweetheart." So I stood there, knife dangling at my side as Nathan launched into another story. He stretched back in his chair, designer shirt tight across his shoulders, bragging about the beach house he'd just closed on. My father's voice rose again, warm with pride. "We should all go down for a visit, like our Key West trip last spring." The knife nearly slipped from my fingers. What Key West trip? For a second, silence fell at the table. Then my mother laughed lightly, waving her hand. "Oh, it was just a quick weekend. You were so busy with work, dear. The words cut deeper than any knife I held. Busy with work. That was their excuse for excluding me, for erasing me, for making sure every memory, every photo, every story belonged to Nathan. And as I stood there, invisible once again in a room full of people I called family, one thought pressed hard against my ribs. Maybe I was never meant to belong here at all. The words still echoed in my head. You were so busy with work, dear. That flimsy excuse wrapped around me like barbed wire. They hadn't just forgotten me. They had chosen to leave me out, chosen to make memories without me. I set the pie knife down carefully on the sideboard, forcing my hands to steady. From the corner of my eye, I watched Nathan lean back in his chair, soaking up every ounce of attention. He was in his element, spinning stories about his new beach house, his new car, his endless promotions. That's when Aunt Margaret leaned forward, her bracelets jingling softly. She smiled at Nathan with a sweetness that twisted in my gut. You know, Nathan, I've decided you should have Grandma's china cabinet. It would look perfect in your dining room. My breath caught. The china cabinet. The one I had admired since I was a little girl, standing on tiptoe to peek at the delicate plates behind the glass. I'd always imagined it in my own home someday, filled with the depression glass I'd been collecting piece by piece from flea markets. It was one of the few family heirlooms I actually cared about. And just like that, it was gone. Handed to Nathan without a second thought. Thanks, Aunt Margaret, Nathan said smoothly, not even glancing in my direction. That's really generous of you. I waited, just 1 second, for someone to say, but what about Dearis? No one did. Instead, my father cleared his throat. It makes sense. Nathan needs it more than you do, Dearis, especially with how much he stretched himself buying that new house. Your mother and I already helped with the down payment, but you know how brutal mortgage rates are these days. The words slammed into me harder than any punch could. Helped with the down payment. I gripped the edge of the sideboard so hard my knuckles whitened. My parents had given him money for his beach house. Real money. Support I had begged for 3 years ago when I was trying to buy my small condo in Orlando. I still remembered that conversation. My father shaking his head, my mother's sigh. It's too risky, Dearis. You're not ready for that kind of responsibility. If you lose it, don't come crying to us. I hadn't lost it. I had scraped and saved and worked double hours to buy that condo on my own. I'd signed every paper without their help. And instead of pride, I got lectures about being financially irresponsible. But Nathan? Nathan shows up with a smile and a half-baked story about needing space, and they hand him tens of thousands of dollars without blinking. The room seemed to tilt as I tried to swallow the lump in my throat. My vision blurred for a moment, rage and humiliation tangling together inside me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab the china cabinet myself and drag it out of Aunt Margaret's house just to prove I was worthy of something. Anything. Instead, I did what I always did. I forced a smile that felt like broken glass in my mouth and asked quietly, "More pie, anyone?" I cut and served mechanically, standing while they all remained seated, their laughter bubbling back to life as though nothing monumental had just been revealed, as though my entire world hadn't shifted. They moved on seamlessly, talking about Nathan's promotion, his golf game, his new boat. Each word was another reminder that no matter how much I gave, how hard I worked, I would never measure up. And with each slice of pie I handed out, the truth dug deeper into my bones. In this family, love wasn't unconditional. It was transactional. Nathan received it freely. I had to earn it, and even then, it was never enough. As I stood there, pie knife in hand, listening to their voices rise and fall, One thought pressed against my chest so hard it stole my breath. What would happen if I stopped serving altogether? I thought the sting of losing Grandma's china cabinet would fade once dessert was over. But it didn't. It followed me into the kitchen, clung to me like the smell of grease in my hair. I tried to push it down, to remind myself I'd survived worse, but my father's words kept echoing. Nathan needs it more than you do. Needs it more? Nathan had never needed for anything. When he wanted a car at 16, my parents bought him one. When he failed his first college class, they paid for a tutor. When he lost his job right out of school, they covered his rent until he found another. Meanwhile, I was working double shifts at a diner, trying to keep the lights on in my tiny apartment, too proud to ask for help I knew I wouldn't get. And now, they had helped him buy a beach house. A beach house. I gripped the counter so hard my nails dug into the wood. I couldn't even get them to co-sign for my condo. But Nathan? He barely had to lift a finger. From the dining room, another wave of laughter rose, sharp and cutting. I peeked through the doorway. My mother was leaning so close to Nathan, she might as well have been whispering into his ear. Her face glowed, her whole body angled toward him, while my father clapped him on the back, pride etched into every line of his jaw. And then came the part that made my chest tighten until it hurt. Aunt Margaret tilted her wineglass toward my parents and said, "It's so wonderful to see how much you support Nathan. Not every family does that. You know?" My mother beamed. "We're proud of him. He's worked so hard. Worked so hard." The words tasted like poison. I wanted to shout across the table. And I haven't? I've worked myself to the bone my entire life, and none of you ever noticed. But my voice stayed stuck in my throat, heavy as stone. Instead, I carried the empty pie plates back to the kitchen, my steps slow, my hands shaking. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was hollow, number. As I rinsed the plates, memories flooded back, uninvited. My 16th birthday. Nathan got a used Mustang with a bow on it. I got a journal and a pen set. My college graduation. Nathan skipped it, but still got a family dinner in his honor when he landed a mediocre job a month later. My promotion last spring passed without so much as a text from my parents. But Nathan's every minor accomplishment was treated like a national holiday. The unfairness was no longer subtle. It was out in the open, flaunted right in my face. They didn't even bother to hide it anymore. I stared down at the sink, watching food scraps swirl down the drain, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel just invisible. I felt disposable. Like my only worth was what I could put on a table, what I could clean off their plates. Without that, who was I to them? The noise from the dining room grew louder, each burst of laughter punctuating the truth I had tried so hard to deny. I didn't belong at that table. I never had. Then my mother's voice cut through the air, high and cheerful. "Dearis, could you bring Nathan some coffee?" He looks tired, I froze. My jaw clenched. My hands gripped the edge of the counter until my knuckles turned white. He looks tired? I hadn't sat down all day. My back ached, my legs throbbed, my head pounded. But Nathan looked tired? For a moment, I couldn't move. My whole body trembled with the weight of it. Every cell in me screamed to walk out the door, to leave them all to fend for themselves. But old habits are chains, and mine held tight. I brewed the coffee. I carried it to the table. I set it down in front of him without a word. Nathan didn't even look at me when he took it. My mother smiled at him like he'd earned it. My father asked him another question about his promotion. Aunt Margaret reached over to pat his hand. And me? I walked back to the kitchen, unseen. But as I leaned against the counter again, the bitterness in my chest hardened into something sharper. A thought I couldn't ignore anymore. Maybe they'd never change. Maybe I'd been waiting my whole life for something that was never going to come. And for the first time, instead of crying, I felt something else rising in me. Something hot, dangerous, unstoppable. Rage. By the time the last fork clinked against a plate and the conversation began to wind down, I was already planning the cleanup in my head. It was automatic at this point, like muscle memory. Who else was going to do it? Certainly not Nathan, who had already slipped off his jacket like he owned the house. Not my parents, who were still basking in his stories. And not Aunt Margaret, who had conveniently switched into guest mode, sipping her wine like she was in a restaurant. So I stacked plates. I scraped leftovers. I washed dishes while the laughter in the dining room rolled on without me. It was like I was invisible, a ghost drifting in and out of their evening, collecting the mess they left behind. And just when I thought the worst was over, my phone buzzed on the counter. He shook his head slowly. It was due Friday. The client meeting is tomorrow morning. This isn't like you. My chest caved in. He was right. This wasn't like me. I had always been the reliable one. The one who stayed late. The one who triple-checked every detail. The one who made sure no one ever had a reason to doubt me. At work, I was the person people depended on. At home, I was the same. And suddenly, I was failing both. After he walked away, I sat there staring at my screen, my heart hammering. The words blurred together. Henderson pitch, Thanksgiving dinner, Nathan's beach house, cranberry relish, deadlines, grocery lists. It all tangled in my mind like a knot I couldn't untangle. That night, sleep was impossible. I tossed and turned, my body aching from exhaustion, my mind replaying every demand, every expectation. At 3:17 a.m., I finally gave up. I padded into the bathroom, chewed 2 chalky antacids, and caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. My face was pale, my eyes rimmed with red. The woman staring back at me looked older than her years, drained and defeated. I pressed my palms against the sink and whispered to my reflection, "What are you doing?" Back in bed, I pulled a notebook from my nightstand drawer. On the first page, I wrote 3 words, things I want. And then I just stared at the blank paper. What did I want? For so long, my life had revolved around what everyone else wanted. What Nathan wanted for dinner, what my mother wanted for the holidays, what my father wanted for appearances. Did I even know what I wanted anymore? The next morning, I arrived at work an hour early. I sat down, finished the Henderson pitch in record time, and sent it off before my boss even stepped into the building. Then I kept going, clearing my inbox, drafting next week's reports, getting ahead for the first time in months. When he finally stopped by my desk, his eyebrows rose. "You're on top of things today." "I'm taking Friday off," I said. The words came out firmer than I expected, not asking, telling. He blinked, surprised. "You've got the time." "Everything okay?" I met his eyes. "Just taking care of myself." It felt foreign, like speaking a new language, but also right. That Thursday, my coworker Sophie leaned against my cubicle wall. "A bunch of us are having a holiday get-together Saturday night. No family drama, just friends, food, and questionable karaoke. You in?" I almost said no. I almost said I had too much to do before Christmas at Nathan's. But something in her smile cracked the shell I'd been carrying. I laughed. A real laugh, the first in weeks. "Questionable karaoke?" She grinned. "Horrific." Dave from IT does an interpretive dance to Total Eclipse of the Heart. It'll haunt your dreams. For the first time, I didn't think about whether it fit into Nathan's schedule, or whether my parents would approve, or what chores were waiting for me. I just thought about what I wanted. And I heard myself say, "Okay." I'm in the relief that washed over me was indescribable. Simple, uncomplicated joy. One night for myself. One night where no one expected me to cook, to clean, to serve. Just to be. It felt like coming up for air after drowning for years. Saturday night came faster than I expected. Normally, I would have spent the weekend knee-deep in recipes, meal plans, and grocery runs, prepping for the next family gathering. But this time, instead of an apron, I pulled on jeans and a sweater, swiped on lipstick I hadn't touched in months, and met Sophie and a handful of coworkers at a little dive bar downtown. The place was loud, sticky, and nothing like the polished dining room at my parents' house. But as soon as I stepped inside, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Relief. No one here cared about centerpieces or perfectly browned rolls. No one expected me to refill their glass without asking. Dearis. Sophie waved me over, already laughing with a margarita in her hand. She squeezed me into the booth beside her, shoving a menu my way. We ordered nachos the size of a mountain. You better help or we'll drown. I laughed, shaking my head, but when the plate arrived, I realized no one was waiting for me to serve it. They just dug in, passing plates around, making a mess, and no one cared. For the first time in a long time, I ate food I hadn't cooked myself. Later, the karaoke machine fired up. Sophie was right. It was horrendous. Dave from IT threw himself into total eclipse of the heart like he was auditioning for Broadway, complete with wild arm gestures and dramatic knee slides. Everyone howled with laughter, tears streaming down our faces. And in the middle of it, someone nudged me. "You're up next, Dearis." My stomach lurched. The thought of standing in front of people, being seen, terrified me. But then I remembered. At home, I was never seen. At work, I was reliable but not remarkable. Maybe here, in this sticky dive bar with friends who actually wanted me around, I could be something else. I grabbed the mic, heart pounding, and chose a song I knew by heart. Fleetwood Mac's Landslide. My voice shook at first, but as I sang, the room quieted. People swayed. Sophie raised her glass to me, smiling wide. And when I hit the final note, the bar erupted in cheers. For once, I wasn't the background. I wasn't the help. I was just me. And they saw me. The high followed me out into the cool night air. Sophie hooked her arm through mine as we walked to our cars. "You were amazing," she said. I shrugged, embarrassed, but she squeezed my arm. "No, really. You deserve nights like this. You deserve people who clap for you." Her words echoed in my chest long after I drove home. People who clap for you. I thought about the countless dinners where I'd cooked for 20, where the food vanished in minutes and not one person said thank you. Not once. When I got home, I pulled out the notebook again. Things I want. This time the page didn't stay blank. The list wasn't long, but it was mine. For the first time, I wrote something that wasn't about Nathan, or my parents, or anyone else. Just me. The next morning, the family group chat buzzed again. My mother was sending reminders. Don't forget the puff pastry appetizers. Oh, and maybe make an extra pie. Nathan's co-workers might drop by. Normally, my stomach would have clenched, my fingers already flying to respond. Got it. But this time, I set the phone down. I let the notification sit there unanswered. And instead, I brewed myself coffee, sat by the window, and watched the sun rise over the city. The guilt was still there, gnawing at the edges, but underneath it was something stronger. A calm defiance. The realization that if I kept living like this, I would lose myself completely. And for the first time, the thought of saying no didn't terrify me. It empowered me. The first call came on a Tuesday evening, just as I was heating up leftovers from the office potluck. My phone buzzed across the counter, my mother's name lighting up the screen. For a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail, but something in me made me swipe to answer. Dearis, she said, her tone brisk, clipped, the same one she used when assigning chores. I need to confirm the Christmas menu with you. Nathan wants the standing rib roast, and I thought you could also make those little puff pastries you did last year. Everyone loved them. I set down my fork slowly, pressing the phone tighter against my ear. Hi, Mom. I'm fine. Thanks for asking. A pause. Then a sigh. Don't be difficult. You know we're counting on you. Family comes first. There it was. The phrase she'd wielded like a weapon my whole life. Family comes first. And by family, she meant Nathan. Something hot surged up my throat. A flame I couldn't swallow this time. Does it? I said quietly. Because from where I'm standing, it seems like Nathan comes first. Her inhale was sharp. That's not fair. Not fair? My laugh was hollow. You gave him Grandma's china cabinet. You gave him money for his house. You post online about how talented he is, how proud you are. And me? I cook, I clean, I host your holidays, and you don't even put my name in the caption. That's not true, she snapped, but her voice wavered. You're good in the kitchen. You've always been so reliable. We know we can count on you. I pressed my palm hard against the countertop, steadying myself. Do you even hear yourself? Reliable. Good in the kitchen. That's not love, Mom. That's convenience. Silence hummed on the other end of the line, but I didn't stop. The words had been buried for too long, and once they started pouring out, I couldn't dam them up. I didn't feel unappreciated, I said, my voice shaking but strong. I was unappreciated. 34 years, and the only role you've ever given me is servant. You don't call me your daughter. You don't clap for me when I succeed. You don't even notice when I'm gone. Her breath hitched. You're exaggerating. We've always loved you. Loved me? My chest burned. Then why wasn't I at Key West? Why didn't you tell me? Why did I find out about that trip from a slip at the dinner table? If that's love, then I don't want it. Her voice dropped, pleading now. Dearest, please. Don't do this. Christmas won't be the same without you. And for the first time, I heard the panic under her words. Not guilt, not apology. Panic. Because without me, who would carry the weight? Who would baste the roast, roll the pastries, clean the dishes? I closed my eyes, inhaling deeply. When I spoke, my voice was steady. Then maybe Christmas needs to change. There was a long silence. I imagined her in the kitchen, clutching her phone the way she clutched her pearls when things didn't go her way. I imagined her turning to my father later, saying I was being dramatic, ungrateful. But I didn't care anymore. Listen to me, I said softly but firmly. If you want me at Christmas, it won't be as your chef or your maid. It will be as your daughter. Nothing less? Her voice cracked, brittle as glass. You're making a mistake. No, I whispered, my throat thick with unshed tears. The mistake was thinking if I kept giving, one day you'd see me. But you never did, and I'm done waiting. When I hung up, my hands trembled, but not from fear. From release. For the first time, I hadn't swallowed my words. I had said them out loud, into the silence, and they couldn't be taken back. And though my chest ached, though the weight of years pressed heavy on my shoulders, beneath it all was something fierce, something steady, the beginning of freedom. After I hung up the phone, my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I paced my apartment, the echo of my mother's voice bouncing in my head. You're making a mistake. No, I thought bitterly. The mistake was trusting them for so long. I tried to focus on work the next morning, but I couldn't. Every email blurred, Every meeting felt hollow. At lunch, I slipped outside for air, the December wind biting at my cheeks. That's when my phone buzzed with a new message. From my father. "We need to talk. Call me tonight." My stomach tightened, but I forced myself to dial later that evening. He picked up on the first ring. "Dearis," he said, his voice deep and controlled, like he was already bracing for an argument. "Your mother tells me you've decided to withdraw from Christmas." I closed my eyes. I didn't decide to withdraw. I decided not to be your servant anymore. A pause. Then his sigh, heavy with disappointment. "You don't understand. Nathan is under pressure. He's building a life, a career. We have to support him. That's what family does." My grip on the phone tightened. And what about me? Where was that support when I bought my condo? When I begged you to co-sign? You told me I was irresponsible. "That's different," he snapped. "You weren't ready." "Not ready?" My voice cracked, the anger spilling out before I could stop it. I worked double shifts, saved every dollar, bought that place on my own. I was more than ready. And you still said no. But Nathan? He barely lifts a finger, and you hand him tens of thousands of dollars. Silence stretched across the line. Then his voice, low and sharp. "We helped him with the down payment, yes. He needed it." The words hit me like a blow. It wasn't a rumor, not an assumption. He was admitting it. My parents had written a check just like that for Nathan. The same parents who once told me there was no safety net if I failed. The same parents who laughed when I said I wanted to travel after graduation, telling me to get serious. I sank into the couch, my whole body trembling. Do you hear yourself? Do you realize what that says to me? That my dreams don't matter, my hard work doesn't matter, only Nathan does? "You're twisting this," he said firmly. "We've always been proud of you." But Nathan's situation... No, I cut him off, the fury boiling over. "Stop making excuses. This isn't about Nathan's situation. This is about favoritism. This is about you deciding one child deserves everything while the other deserves nothing. And I'm done pretending it's okay." The silence on the line was deafening. For once, he had no quick answer, no lecture to shut me down. Just breathing. Heavy. Uncomfortable. Finally, he said, "You sound ungrateful." My laugh was bitter. Hollow. "Ungrateful? I cooked your holidays, cleaned your messes, carried the weight of this family on my back. And you never said thank you. Not once. But the moment I ask for fairness, I'm ungrateful?" His voice hardened. "Watch your tone, Dearis." I swallowed hard, but I didn't back down this time. "No, you watch yours. Because for the first time, I'm not afraid of losing your approval." I never had it in the first place. I ended the call before he could respond, my chest heaving, tears burning hot in my eyes. The room was quiet. Too quiet, and for a moment the loneliness was crushing. But underneath the ache, there was clarity. They had chosen. Not just once, but over and over again. And it was never me. I sat there in the silence, the truth solidifying in my bones. My family didn't just fail to support me, they betrayed me. They had the chance to lift me up, and instead they pushed me down so Nathan could stand taller. The realization was brutal, but it was also freeing. Because once you see betrayal for what it is, you can't unsee it. And you can't keep living like it's not there. After I ended the call with my father, I sat in the quiet of my apartment for a long time, staring at the phone in my lap. His words echoed in my head. We helped him with the down payment. He needed it. The betrayal felt so sharp I could barely breathe. It wasn't just favoritism anymore. It was a choice. And they hadn't chosen me. For years, I told myself maybe I was imagining it. Maybe if I worked harder, stayed quieter, gave more, they'd notice. But now the curtain had been pulled back, and there was no pretending left. That night, I opened the family group chat. The screen was still full of messages about Christmas, lists of dishes, decorations, schedules. My name sprinkled throughout, attached to every task: stuffing, pies, appetizers, setup, cleanup. Like I was a caterer they'd hired, not their daughter. My hands trembled as I tapped the keyboard. For a moment, I hesitated, the old fear rising. What if this breaks us completely? What if they hate me forever? But then another voice inside, stronger, steadier, whispered, "They already broke you. You're just the only one willing to admit it." So I began to type, "I need to make something clear. I will not be hosting, cooking, or serving at Christmas this year." I stopped, exhaled. My pulse thundered in my ears, but I kept going. For 34 years, I have cooked every holiday meal, cleaned every dish, set every table. I have been told my place was in the kitchen while Nathan was celebrated at the table. I have watched you give him houses, heirlooms, and praise while I got silence. You tell me I'm reliable, but reliable is not the same as loved. The words poured out faster now, years of silence breaking open like a dam. When I bought my condo with my own savings, you called me irresponsible. When Nathan bought his house, you gave him tens of thousands of dollars. You excluded me from family trips, erased me from family photos, and never once asked what I wanted. I have given, and in return, I have been treated like a servant. I stared at the blinking cursor, my chest tight, but I wasn't finished. So this year, I will not be at Christmas. Not because I don't care about family, but because I finally care about myself. If you want me at the table, it will be as your daughter, not your maid. My thumb hovered over the send button. The old me would have deleted it, swallowed it, gone back to baking pies and smiling through the pain. But the Dearis was gone. I pressed send. The message shot off into the chat, and for a moment I felt like the air had been punched from my lungs. My whole body shook. I set the phone down, pacing the apartment, every nerve buzzing with fear and relief. The replies didn't take long. My mother's text came first. "Dearest, this is ridiculous. Don't ruin Christmas for everyone." Then my father. "Ungrateful. After everything we've done for you," Nathan chimed in next. "Wow. Dramatic much? This is why no one takes you seriously." Each message stung, but not in the way it once would have. Because for every word they threw at me, I had already built my shield. I had already told the truth. And then, a new notification: Aunt Margaret. Her reply was only 2 words. "I understand." I sank into the couch, tears spilling hot down my cheeks. 2 words. That's all it took to remind me I wasn't crazy. I wasn't invisible. At least one person saw me. I closed my eyes, letting the tears fall. For the first time, they weren't tears of frustration or helplessness. They were tears of release. Because I had drawn the line. I had said no. And no matter how much they yelled, no matter how many guilt trips they sent, I wasn't going back. Christmas would come. The table would be set. The roast would be carved. The wine would flow. And for the first time in decades, I wouldn't be there. And maybe, just maybe, that absence would speak louder than all the words they refused to hear. The messages didn't stop after my announcement. For 2 days, my phone buzzed like a hornet's nest. My mother guilt-tripping, my father lecturing, Nathan mocking. I muted the group chat, but then came the call. Not from Mom, not from Dad. From Aunt Margaret. "Sweetheart," she said gently, "your mother asked me to meet you for coffee." She says she wants to talk face to face. I hesitated, staring at the frosted window of my apartment. Every instinct told me it was a trap, another performance where I'd be painted as the villain. But something in Aunt Margaret's voice, soft, almost protective, made me agree. We met on a gray December morning at a cafe downtown. The place was quiet, the smell of cinnamon and espresso wrapping around me as I walked in. My mother was already there, sitting stiff-backed at a corner table, her purse neatly folded beside her. And next to her, like a prop, sat a worn leather photo album. "Dearis," she said when I approached, her smile tight, brittle. "I'm glad you came." I slid into the chair across from her, my guard up. "I'm here to listen. But I won't be manipulated." She blinked, wounded. "Manipulated? Is that what you think of me?" She opened the album with a flourish, pages flipping to pictures of my childhood. Me in a Halloween costume. Me holding Nathan's hand on his first day of school. "Look at these memories. Look at all the love we've shared." The images blurred in front of me. Yes, there I was. But always on the sidelines, always framed around Nathan. Him in the center, me holding the cake. Him opening presents, me clapping. Him with trophies, me carrying his jacket. I pushed the album back gently. "These aren't proof of love. They're proof of how well I played the part you gave me." Her face hardened, the mask slipping. "You're rewriting history." "We gave you everything." "No," I said firmly, my voice trembling but clear. "You gave Nathan everything. You gave me chores, expectations, silence." Her lips pressed tight, her eyes flashing with anger. "You're being dramatic. Families aren't perfect. You've always been sensitive." I leaned forward, the words spilling before I could stop them. "Sensitive? Mom, do you even hear yourself? You left me out of vacations. You handed Nathan Grandma's cabinet, money for his house, all while telling me I was irresponsible. I wasn't unappreciated. I was erased." Her hand froze on the photo album, her mouth opening but no words coming out. For the first time, she didn't have a quick dismissal ready. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder I'd prepared the night before. Inside were printouts of the Facebook posts I'd saved, the group chat screenshots, the lists of chores with my name attached. I slid them across the table. "When you're ready to have a daughter instead of a servant, I'll be here. But until then, I'm done playing this role." The cafe was quiet around us, the only sound the hiss of the espresso machine. My mother stared at the papers, her face pale. For a moment, I thought I saw something crack. Regret, maybe, or fear. But then she closed the album with a snap and stood. "You'll regret this," she whispered. "Family doesn't last forever." I stood too, my legs shaking but steady. "Neither does being invisible." Aunt Margaret touched my shoulder as my mother swept out, her perfume trailing behind her. "You did the right thing," she said softly. "Don't let her twist it otherwise." Outside, the cold air hit me like a slap, but instead of shrinking, I breathed deeper. For the first time in my life, I had said everything that needed to be said. No more silence, no more pretending. And though my heart ached, beneath it was something fierce, unshakable. Freedom. The morning of Christmas Eve, my phone lit up with a dozen notifications before I'd even rolled out of bed. Missed calls, texts, voicemails, all from my family. I didn't open them. I didn't need to. I knew exactly what they would say. Guilt, orders disguised as pleas, Nathan mocking me for being dramatic. But this year, their noise wasn't mine to carry. I turned the phone face down on the nightstand and stretched under the covers, letting sunlight pour through the blinds. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't rushing to the grocery store, preheating an oven, or scrubbing pans until my hands cracked. I was just breathing. By noon, I was on the road with Sophie and two other friends from work, our bags stuffed in the trunk, Christmas music blasting through the speakers. We were heading south, chasing warmth and salt air instead of tradition. Can you believe it? Sophie laughed over the music. You're finally free. No casseroles, no turkey, no Nathan, I laughed too. The sound bubbling up easier than it had in months. I don't even know who I am without an apron on. Then you're about to find out. She grinned. We pulled into Key West just as the sun was dipping low, painting the sky in streaks of orange and pink. The air was warm, the streets alive with people in Santa hats and flip-flops, music spilling from open bars. I breathed it in, the salty tang of the ocean, the scent of grilled fish and sunscreen. This wasn't the Christmas I grew up with, but maybe it was the one I needed. That night, we sat on the beach with paper plates piled high with tacos from a food truck, our toes buried in the sand. Someone passed me a beer, someone else strummed a guitar, and for the first time in years, I felt present. Not in the background, not scrambling to make everything perfect. Just here. At one point, Sophie nudged me, pointing her phone toward me. Smile, Dearis. I froze for half a second, instinctively bracing for the old sting of being cropped out, shoved to the side. But this time, I was in the center. Sophie's arm looped around mine, our friends leaning close, laughter caught mid-breath. When she showed me the photo, I almost cried. There I was, not invisible, not erased, just me. Later, as the waves lapped at the shore and the stars pricked the sky, I pulled out my notebook again. Things I want. This time, I added a new line. To make my own holidays. And in that moment, it didn't feel selfish. It felt sacred. Back at the hotel, I finally glanced at my phone. Dozens of messages filled the screen. My mother's frantic. We can't do this without you. The roast is ruined. My father's curt. You're embarrassing us. Nathan's irritated. Do you realize how much you've ruined tonight? But tucked between them was one more from Aunt Margaret. I'm proud of you. Enjoy your Christmas, sweetheart. I set the phone down, tears stinging my eyes. Not from guilt this time, but from relief. For once, I didn't feel trapped by their expectations. I felt free. As I drifted off to sleep that night, the laughter of my friends still echoing in my ears, I realized something I'd never dared admit before. The holidays didn't belong to my family's traditions. They could belong to me too. And maybe, just maybe, this was the start of building a life where I was no longer the servant at the table, but the author of my own joy. While I sat on a beach towel with sand between my toes and laughter in my ears, my family was unraveling. I didn't have to imagine it. They told me themselves, one frantic message at a time. At 3:42 p.m. on Christmas Eve, my mother texted, "The roast isn't cooking right. What temperature did you usually use? Call me as soon as possible, 10 minutes later. We burned the appetizers. Nathan says they taste like charcoal. Then, your father is furious. Please, Dearis, we need you." I scrolled through them in the glow of a tiki torch, the ocean crashing softly behind me. For years, those messages would have sent me sprinting to their rescue, apron tied tight, guilt gnawing at my insides. But tonight, I sipped my drink, leaned back and let the words roll off my skin like seawater. By 6 o'clock, the panic escalated. My father's name popped up on my screen, a string of voicemails waiting. I listened to one out of morbid curiosity. Dearis. His voice growled, tense with frustration. The turkey's raw in the middle. Your mother says we need more side dishes, and Nathan's complaining he's starving. You've embarrassed us. Everyone's waiting and there's no food on the table. This is shameful. I laughed out loud, startling Sophie, who raised an eyebrow. What? Nothing, I said, tucking the phone away. Just karma. But the messages kept coming. From Nathan. Unbelievable. You ditched us, and now everything's falling apart. Do you get off on this? On ruining things? From my mother at nearly midnight. I can't stop crying. Christmas is ruined. How could you do this to your family? Every word was meant to sting, to drag me back into the old cycle of guilt and obligation. But instead of pain, I felt something else. Validation. For the first time, they were facing the reality I had carried for decades, that without me, the perfect holidays they bragged about didn't exist. The next morning, Christmas Day, I woke to sunlight streaming through the hotel curtains and another avalanche of texts. Photos this time. The Parker dining room in disarray. A roast blackened on the outside, raw in the center. Side dishes that looked half-eaten and abandoned. A half-empty bottle of wine sitting crooked on the table, glasses scattered. In one photo, Nathan was scowling, his sleeves rolled up, holding a carving knife like it was a weapon. My father's face was flushed, my mother's mascara streaked down her cheeks. They looked nothing like the picture-perfect family they liked to post on Facebook. I stared at the images for a long moment, then passed the phone to Sophie. She snorted, covering her mouth. They're falling apart without you. Exactly, I whispered, almost to myself. They finally know what it feels like. And it wasn't about revenge. Not really. It wasn't about making them suffer for the sake of suffering. It was about balance. About finally forcing them to see the truth. I wasn't optional. I wasn't background noise. I was the backbone of their holidays, the glue that held it all together. Without me, there was no feast, no perfect photos, no glowing Facebook posts. And maybe, just maybe, that lesson would stick. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I pulled out my notebook again. Underneath my list of things I want, I added, to stop apologizing for walking away. Because for the first time in 34 years, I hadn't apologized. I hadn't explained. I hadn't rushed in to fix what they broke. I had let them sit in the mess they made. And it felt like freedom. New Year's Eve came only a week later, and instead of dragging myself to another obligation, I opened my door to something entirely new. Sophie and a few friends from work arrived with bags of groceries, clinking bottles of champagne, and a Bluetooth speaker blasting Mariah Carey. This time, Sophie said, tossing me an apron with a wink. We're all cooking. No one gets stuck in the kitchen alone. I laughed, tying the apron loosely around my waist. It felt different. Lighter. Not a uniform of servitude, but a choice. The apartment filled with the smell of garlic bread, sizzling onions, and laughter. My tiny dining table, usually quiet and bare, was suddenly covered with mismatched plates and bowls. Friends elbow to elbow as they chopped vegetables and stirred pots. Someone spilled wine. Someone else burned the garlic. But instead of sighs and criticism, the room erupted in laughter. I found myself humming as I layered lasagna noodles, not because anyone demanded it, but because I wanted to. Every dish was shared. Someone stirring beside me, another taste testing, everyone helping clean as we went. For the first time in my life, a holiday meal didn't feel like a burden. It felt like joy. When the food was finally ready, we crammed around the table, shoulders brushing, plates overflowing. Sophie raised her glass first, her eyes warm. To chosen family, she said. The words hung in the air, sinking deep into my chest. I lifted my own glass, my throat tightening. To chosen family, I echoed. And everyone clinked, laughter spilling over the clatter of glasses. Later, as fireworks crackled in the distance, someone suggested we take a group photo. I froze for a split second, old habits kicking in. The fear of being shoved to the side, cropped out, forgotten. But then Sophie grabbed my arm and tugged me to the center. "No way you're hiding in the back," she teased. "You're the reason we're here." The flash went off, capturing us mid-laughter, arms tangled, eyes bright. When I saw the photo later, I almost didn't recognize myself. Not because I looked different, but because I looked happy. For years, holidays had been about survival, about pushing through exhaustion, swallowing resentment, plastering on a smile no one cared to notice. But this night was different. This night was mine. After everyone left, dishes stacked but not oppressive, I curled up on the couch with my notebook again. I flipped to the page titled "Things I Want" and added a new line. To create my own traditions, because I realized something important that night. Family wasn't about blood. Family was about presence, about effort, about people who clapped when you sang off key and laughed when you burned the garlic. People who saw you. "Can we talk?" I stared at the screen, my pulse quickening. For days after Christmas, I'd muted every alert, ignored every call. But now, the simplicity of those 3 words tugged at me. Not a command, not a guilt trip, just a question. I agreed to meet her at a small cafe. Not the one from before, but somewhere new, neutral ground. When I arrived, she was already seated, hands wrapped around a mug like it was the only thing holding her together. She looked smaller somehow, her shoulders hunched, eyes tired. "Dearis," she began, her voice unsteady. "Christmas was hard without you." I didn't respond right away. I wanted to see where she would go without me filling the silence. She glanced down, fumbling with her napkin. "We tried." We really did. But nothing worked. The food was awful. Your father yelled. Nathan stormed out halfway through. It was chaos. And I kept thinking, if only you had been there. I felt the familiar weight pressing in, the guilt they had always used like cha. And maybe my parents, maybe Nathan, would never understand that. Maybe they'd keep calling me ungrateful, dramatic, selfish. But here, in this little apartment full of warmth and laughter, I finally understood. I wasn't any of those things. I was free. I didn't need their table anymore. I had built my own. And for the first time, the holidays didn't feel like chains. They felt like wings. The first week of January, when the last of the holiday lights were fading and the world was settling back into routine, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't the family group chat. It was a single message from my mother. Ins. But this time I breathed through it, steady. "If only I'd been there to save you," I said quietly. Her eyes flicked up, searching my face. "That's not what I meant." "Yes, it is." I leaned forward, my voice calm but firm. "That's what it's always meant. I clean up your messes, I cook your meals, I make your holidays perfect, and you all pretend that's love. But it's not. It's dependency. It's using me." She flinched, her fingers tightening on the mug. For a moment, I thought she'd argue, the way she always did. But instead, she whispered, "Maybe you're right." The words stunned me. I had braced for denial, anger, excuses. But not this. She swallowed hard. "When you didn't come, I realized we never really thought about what it cost you. We just assumed you'd always do it. Because you always did. And maybe we took you for granted." My throat tightened, tears pricking at the corners of my eyes. It wasn't a full apology. Not yet. But it was more honesty than I had ever heard from her. "I don't want things to stay this way," she said softly. "I don't want to lose you." I sat back, my notebook heavy in my bag. The words, "things I want," echoing in my mind. For years, I had begged for scraps of acknowledgement. Now, for the first time, I had leverage. My absence had spoken louder than my silence ever did. "I don't want to lose you either," I admitted, "but I won't come back to the way things were. If you want me in your life, it has to be as your daughter. Not your maid, not your scapegoat. Your daughter." She nodded slowly, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I'll try." I held her gaze, steady. "Trying isn't enough. You need to change." The silence between us was heavy, but different this time. Not suffocating, but tentative, like a fragile bridge being built plank by plank. When we finally stood to leave, she reached for me. Her hand hovered, then settled on mine. It wasn't the warm, certain embrace I had longed for as a child, but it wasn't empty either. It was something in between. A beginning. Walking home, the winter air sharp against my face, I felt the weight of it all. Nothing was magically fixed. My father was still stubborn, Nathan was still arrogant, and years of favoritism wouldn't vanish overnight. But a crack had formed in the wall that had kept me invisible. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough for now. Because I had learned something important. Healing didn't mean going back to the way things were. It meant building something new, or walking away if they refused. Either way, I wasn't powerless anymore. A week after that coffee with my mother, I found myself sitting by the window with a cup of tea, sunlight spilling across the page of my notebook. The list, once titled, "Things I Want," had grown. Rest, freedom, respect, laughter, new traditions. And for the first time, I didn't just want them. I was living them. My phone buzzed with a photo from Sophie. Me in the center, laughing so hard my eyes crinkled. Friends crowded around, plates and glasses scattered across the table. No stage smiles, no background blur. Just me, right there, finally seen. For years, I thought love meant sacrifice. That family meant enduring silence and swallowing pain. But now I know the truth. Family isn't about blood. Family is about who claps for you when you shine, who sees you even when you're quiet. And that night, when I finally said no, it didn't just end one chapter. It began another. I wasn't the servant anymore. I was the author of my own joy. If this story touched something in you, if you've ever felt overlooked or erased, remember, you're not alone. Hit like, subscribe to Hidden Family Revenge Stories, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Because sometimes the greatest revenge isn't loud. It's choosing yourself and never apologizing for it.